in the wake of Tuesday's attacks. Navy Secretary Gordon England, Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Vern Clark, and Brigadier General Clyde Vaughn answered reporters' questions at the Pentagon for about 45 minutes.
Thanks very much, Tori. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. This has been a difficult couple days for everyone here in the Pentagon. I know for everyone in New York particularly, and everyone across America. I do appreciate this opportunity to be here to express my condolences, my deep sorrow, my prayers for all the families in America who have suffered such a great tragedy, and in particular for all the Navy families. As President Bush commented in his press conference, this is the first war of the 21st century. And this is going to take the long-term commitment of everyone here in the Pentagon, of our military services, and of all Americans. This is not going to be a short program. I do want to thank and particularly commend all those who have worked so hard. Who were directly responsible for saving so many lives after the incident here at the Pentagon, because there were people who showed up and led the way for a lot of other people, and without their help, this would have been a much worse tragedy. So for those unknown heroes, and we don't know who those people are, but to them, I on behalf of myself and all the people who walked out of this building in good shape, I just want to give them my special gratitude. And again, for all America, our prayers and thoughts are with you. And thanks to everybody in America for all the support that you provide everyone here in the Department of Navy. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Admiral Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Good afternoon. As has been previously announced, and we are releasing to you this afternoon, 42 Navy personnel were working in the Pentagon at the time of the attack and have not been accounted for. These 42 people were serving their nation and when they were attacked. And in my profession, I always talk to those of us in the Navy and to our Navy family about service. It is what our profession is about. These men and women committed their lives and have committed their lives to be lives of consequence and lives of service. And they have been wearing the cloth of the nation, and I'm talking about those who are wearing the uniform and those in civilian clothes, because this involves both military people and civilian individuals who are serving our Navy. As many of you know, the Navy has an established system to notify family members about the status of their loved ones during a time of tragedy, when a tragedy like this strikes. We have a process where we assign casualty assistance officers, and we have done so in this case. And they have personally met with family members and become the personal conduit for information to the families and in support of the families. This process was put into place immediately after the attack, and as soon as we began to gather the information about those who we could not account for. This is a process that is routinely applied to military personnel. In this case, we have applied this program to both military and civilian people that I have identified, and they are in contact with the families. I would just say that on behalf of the entire Navy family, we extend our deepest sympathy and condolences to the loved ones of those who in New York and here in Washington. We especially talk to our Navy family today about those that remain unaccounted for. These are the sons and daughters and moms and dads, aunts and uncles of the nation, and they're our Navy family. So we are all pulling together to support one another together, and we so appreciate the support that we are getting, the work that is going on here at the Pentagon, working at the scene of action, the support that we're getting in the interagency process, and the fact that and the support that our families are getting, where people are reaching out to our people who have been affected by this attack.
Mr. Secretary, when are you expect to be able to start releasing names of those who have been unaccounted for?
We have a list that is to be released to you now, and it has the list of the 42 individuals that we are speaking to that were working here in the building, and that is available to you now.
Could you tell us, were they any civilians? Were they all military personnel?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I thought, let me make this more clear.
Perhaps we should have the list.
I thought it had been released, but it is available to you. There are 33 military members, and there are 9 civilians on this list. The civilians include people who are permanently working for the government and some contractor personnel who were under contract in support of work going on in the Pentagon and were working here at the time. And we have been working to refine this, and this is the best information that we have at this time.
Admiral Clark, can you, we've seen some of the U.S. Navy ships deployed on both coasts. We've got some pictures of them on CNN. Can you describe a little bit about what their mission is? What are they there to do? And,
Well, Jamie, you know from previous discussions that I've had here that every day we have a large number of ships at sea. There are approximately 95 ships deployed overseas as we speak, and there are on an average day 150 ships out of the 317 that we have in the Navy operating off of our shores and forward deployed. The same is true today. There are ships operating at sea today off of our coast. Secretary Rumsfeld talked earlier that we don't talk about the specific nature of those operations, and I'm not going to speak to their tasking or their mission or the orders that they have received, but I would certainly confirm that there are ships operating at sea.
well, Secretary England, if you could just speak, either of you could speak generally about what the Navy is doing to support the civilians in the time of this crisis, either in humanitarian response, or what is it that, how is the Navy supporting the civilians?
General Bond.
I just wanted to know about the Navy specific role. That maybe you could comment just briefly.
I would just say that we are prepared to respond to and have responded to requests for support. It has been previously reported that the Comfort is underway and headed for New York, and these. I won't talk to specific taskings, you know, that units have at sea, but just say that we're prepared to respond to any requirement that comes to us from the Secretary or the National Command Authority or channels and requested through the DOMS and FEMA support channels.
Admiral, your overworked CHINFO staff has been in different parts of the building now. They were in the new wedge. What's the state of their office? Is it a total disaster or is it recoverable?
I don't have specific information on all of the offices in that area, and that in fact the area is closed off right now. So I can't speak to the specifics of that. Those are things that will have to be examined as the area is opened up for that kind of examination and inspection. We have relocated these individuals so that they can carry out their duties.
Can you tell us what types of Navy offices were damaged? It's hard to tell from reading this list what these folks do exactly, A, and B, how will this affect any preparations for what may be to come down the road?
The second part of your question, it will not affect any preparations for things that are to come. We have relocated individuals. We have people that are moving back, some people that have already moved back into the building, and we have are working at alternate sites so that we obviously some places are, because we have a number of offices in that area. That's pretty straightforward, and we have people that are working determining the exact square footage is going to be required, but we haven't, back to the previous question, we do have to determine the requirement.
I'm sorry, can you give us a sense of what types of operations were damaged in the attack?
I really can't do that because I don't know all of them. A number of these people had moved in the last few days. Some of these offices I had been to, and some that I literally had not been to the offices yet. And so I don't have personal knowledge of that. We'd have to get somebody else to provide you that information.
Admiral Clark, I think the Navy Command Center, as I understood it, was fully and completely destroyed. How has that impacted your operations here, and what alternative arrangements have you made?
The Navy Operations Center was in this area. It is not correct that it is correct that it was damaged. It is not correct that to assume that all the people that work there are on the unaccounted for list. We have reestablished our Operations Center at another location, and we are functioning.
Is that in this building?
We have reestablished our Operations Center, and it is functioning.
Admiral, have you gotten any even anecdotal reports of increase, a spike in recruiting numbers since this incident took place? We've been hearing some of that. Have you heard any of that?
I haven't focused on that, Jamie. I will tell you that I have received numbers of email personally from people, even individuals who have retired, that said, Admiral, give me a job. I'm ready to come back. And I would just, I don't have the specifics on the recruiting numbers, so I can't give them to you. I had not heard that, Mr. Secretary. I don't know if you've
heard anything about whether even anecdotally there's been a spike in recruiting?
No, I have not, but of course recruiting was up considerably even before this incident, so I would not be surprised if it continued to increase.
Secretary, would you classify these individuals as combat casualties? Are they victims of war?
I guess with terrorism, every place is a combat zone. So certainly New York was a combat zone, the Pentagon was a combat zone. So when it comes to terrorism, I think every place in the world is a combat zone.
Admiral, I know you don't want to talk capabilities of the ship. I mean, talk specifically about the missions of the ships off the East Coast, but can you give the American people a sense that they have a capability to link with the Air Force, to talk to the Air Force, NORAD that covers the United States, and if called on, provide some kind of air cover? Can you give us a sense of the joint aspects or what they
Well,
provide?
I would, absolutely. I will tell you that they are conducting joint operations. You could tell from the photos that the carrier was out there, and if you look closely, you should be able to tell that there are fighter aircraft on the carrier, and I will tell you that this is being conducted as a joint operation. There are also air defense ships, cruisers and destroyers operating in the area with them, and all of that is being done in a joint manner. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, can you give us any, again, without not going into operational aspects, can you give us a little bit of a brief on your capabilities in the Indian Ocean, the extent of the reach of the current capabilities that you have?
Well, it is unclassified information that we have battle groups operating in that area. We do. And their capability is they have each carrier has approximately 75 aircraft aboard. Those include fighter and strike aircraft. They include surveillance aircraft. They include other kinds of support aircraft that are necessary to conduct a full range of combat missions. Each of those battle groups have a number of ships, and I won't get into specific divisions, but let's just use round numbers, you know, like a dozen per battle group, and that doesn't count all the support ships that are there to make the logistic train function effectively. They're on station We have two battle groups in that general part of the world, and that's all I would say about that.
Can you tell us if the reach is long enough to extend into Afghanistan?
I certainly would not ever talk about, that would then imply a specific location that I wouldn't even consider talking about.
Well, could you describe in a little more detail some of the offices which were impacted, where the victims are from, and could you say whether you knew any of the victims in particular?
Well, I really, as I said, I don't. I said the Operations Center is in that area. Some of my personal staff were in that general area, and let me just say that some of these 42 are permanently assigned to the headquarters staff, and some are in support of, and that's a good way to characterize this. I would just also say that the Navy has been touched in a broader way in that some of the individuals that were on the aircraft are members of the Navy family. I'm not going to, I don't have purview over the release of information and the release of names there. That's available to you through other channels. But I would tell you that Navy families have been affected by this. Some family members were on the aircraft in New York and here in Washington. For example, one of our petty officers, his 11-year-old child was on the plane and headed for the West Coast, and so we have been touched in a broad way, both here with workers working at the Pentagon, people who were assigned here that their full-time assignment might not have been here, but were here in support of us at the Pentagon. Family members, other members of the Washington community that were on the airplane. So this is a day that, and a period that the Navy family is once again pulling together. This is about people who are willing to commit their life to a life of service, and I just want the whole world to know that this naval officer is mighty proud to be serving with people who are committed to such a lifestyle.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to introduce U.S. Army Brigadier General Clyde A. Vaughn. It's V-A-U-G-H-N, who is the Deputy Director of the Directorate of Military Support, also known as DOMS. The Directorate's function is to develop planning and guidance and procedures for military support of civil authorities. The Army is the DoD executive agent and has the authority of the Secretary of Defense to task the DoD components to plan for and commit resources, DoD resources, in response to requests from civil authorities. Obviously, in the present situation, they're performing a very significant role. And General Vaughn will give you some information on the procedures for how we provide the support to the civil authorities, tell you about what support is currently being furnished, and take your questions. And given everything that's going on, we really appreciate him taking the time to do this. Sir? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Director of Military Support this afternoon. I think, but before I start, from a personal perspective, let me tell you about where I was at the particular time it happened and what I saw. I was off campus, so to speak, at another meeting. Got word of the explosion in the towers and was told, hey, this is terrorism, you need to get back here, because one of my jobs is to help run the Army CAT as the Deputy Director of current operations also. And so I rapidly moved out to 395, and as many of you know exactly where it's at, started that way. Off of Glebe, got up to the top of the hill, you know, where you're looking down on the Pentagon and out across to the monument and Capitol and whatnot. And out on my left, that airliner came right down parallel with us. I watched it track right on into the Pentagon. Now, from that particular juncture, Probably took 4 or 5 minutes to get down there to where that big hole and that fire was in the side of that building. And we pulled up there, and there were policemen and there were civilians routing traffic and moving stuff through there rapidly. And there was a tremendous risk, obviously, from the heat and everything that was going on. And what I saw as I passed down through there, got out and rapidly moved around the building to the operations center, was an unknown number of acts of personal courage and heroism. And I say this because all the military personnel, all the civilians, you know, there they were. There were people coming out of the building, limping, burned badly, and every one of them had 1, 2, and 3 people that really cared for them, and they were comforting those people and doing the very best they could for them, in spite of the tremendous danger that was right on the other side. And that particular piece, I'm sure, has been replicated, you know, in New York. Did you see that? So struck with that, you know, and that kind of as a background, let's talk about DOMS just a little bit and what it really is. It provides military support to civilian authorities as requested by a lead federal agency. And what you take away from this is that we're not really pushing, we're in support. DOD is in support. And right now, especially in New York City, you know, it's like a great big tank of water over there with a little faucet on the other side. Big, congested, restricted area where they've got a lot of horsepower and they've got a lot of equipment trying to get at this very, very complex problem. So one of the overriding pieces that you got to take out of here is that all services are prepared to do whatever it takes to assist in that. And for consequence management, which is where this is right now, FEMA is the lead federal agency, okay? Why a green suitor talking to you today? The Secretary of the Army is the executive agent for the Secretary of Defense. What you need to take away from that is, because of the importance of military support to civilian authorities, that responsibility for making those kinds of decisions are held at the highest levels of DOD. That means that the Secretary of Defense owns this program. He makes that decision. Those decisions are executed by the Secretary of the Army as the executive agent. He obviously coordinates, talks to, and makes those kinds of decisions to enable us to go forward. Now, I say that because that line of communication and authority is extremely short. Notice what I just said? Sec Army to Sec Def. I work for an Army 2-star. DOMS is made up of representatives from all services, all components. And we're located, and I'm kind of giving the 5 W's, I'm located in a place, we, DOMS, are located in a place that many of you have been, commonly referred to maybe affectionately as the hole, you know, or the bunker. That's where it's located, in conjunction with the Army Operations Center. Let me tell you what you need to take away from this one. Is that particular Operations Center, like many others in the building, never missed a beat. We took the big lick on the other side of that building, and that Operations Center was never without power, was electronically linked to all the other major headquarters in the military, and has functioned as a crisis action center ever since the towers were struck. It, like all other operations centers that are going now, especially in this building, is represented by all the staffs of those particular services. We have everybody in there. So when you talk about, hey, are you operational? You know, how can you operate? Operations is the name of the game right now, and they're all there. I want to talk just quickly about process. We get a request from a lead federal agency, and in this case, again, at the time and place that we're at, that lead federal agency again is FEMA. That request moves rapidly to the Office of the Secretary of Defense. They pass it to DOMS quickly. At DOMS, we take and work all the little actions associated with that and put it in terms of an order. And oh, by the way, this is what this really says. We get it to the Secretary of the Army rapidly. He gives us a thumbs up after he does his coordination with the Secretary of Defense, and we launch the order. Now, what that means is DOMS can task the services, the components. Most of the time, what we do is go directly to that SYNC that has that responsibility, which is SYNC Joint Forces Command. And they, in turn, looking out at all the service forces, select those units that are getting ready to go where to do what for that lead federal agency. We've provided a lot of support. The numbers are moving just like, I mean, right now as I'm up here talking to you, that number is increasing, you know, all the time. But we're planning, we're getting ready, and all over the United States right now and overseas, all forces and all headquarters are poised to provide whatever is required. I'll take your questions.
Can you just give some examples of what you're doing now? I realize that you're poised to do a lot, yes. But what is, and I know that there's the funnel you described, so what is it that you're actually able to do now in terms of support for the civilian?
The pieces, as you asked Admiral Clark there a few minutes ago, the piece on the hospital ship Comfort, you know, that's moving that way, 500 beds and 500 medical personnel. There's another piece as far as a request for assistance from FEMA that we filled that has to do with base support installations. And what I mean by this is, you know, that's a congested and restricted area in New York City today. So they've got to set up somewhere on the periphery real quick. And I'm not going to tell you where those places are because, again, we're in support of FEMA. If they will release where those locations are. But Admiral Clark and the Navy has a significant piece of that, as do the other services. So, for instance, there were taskings immediately to fly things. Blood, tissue, search and rescue teams, specialized equipment rapidly to New York City. Those requests were in there. The request for base support installations as FEMA goes through all this process of wrestling with and figuring this big animal out. There were requests for security forces from all services. I'm not going to be specific with numbers. I'm not going to tell you exactly where they're at. You've been here in the Pentagon, you know where some of them are, and you know that some of those are National Guard soldiers, you know, that were moved quickly down here. There are considerations, and there were considerations in the early part of this about COOP, and I think most of you know somewhat about the continuity of operations programs. And there were considerations for security on those items. There's area considerations for security in New York City today that the first responders, you know, who are, you know, after the first of all, New York City has a tremendous number of first responders. And we know what's going to happen in 48 to 72 hours. The number of policemen up there that it requires for saturation and security and area security patrols and whatnot, we had the governor of New York, in conjunction with the adjutant general, moved about 4,600, I believe, Army National Guard soldiers down there rapidly, and a significant number of those soldiers are in a state active duty status. DOD assets, they're in a state active duty status, providing security in New York. Needless to say, the entire New York National Guard is in a standby status. Like a lot of us, waiting for that request, that specific request of what they want DOD to do. Yes, ma'am.
When you saw that plane come into the side of the Pentagon, what was your first thought?
I'll tell you, you'll have several emotions. You know, very complex. One is a tremendous amount of anger, you know, that we have countries that would support something like that. The next one is a tremendous emotional factor, you know, that deals with the people on board that airplane. And the third one is helplessness.
Ari Fleischer at the White House said that the United States had credible evidence that the plane was originally headed for the White House. Based just on your observation, were you able to see anything that would indicate the plane abruptly changed course? Or did you see anything that would have supported that?
Personal observation, and someone would have to go back out and look at this. And I think the radar folks will be able to back this up at some time. As I came from the same conference that General Rudisil was in back there, and as I moved down 395, you know what I was doing was scanning the air. And there wasn't anything in the air except for one airplane. And that airplane was loitering. As I reconstruct this, and I may have that angle wrong, but it looked to me like it was loitering maybe up over maybe Georgetown or something like that in a high left-hand bank. Now, it was up a little ways. And it was too far off to identify. That may have been the plane because there was nothing else around. And that's you know, things were unusual. No planes in the sky except for that one. And like you all, we've seen every pattern in the world around Washington, D.C., and I've never seen one in that pattern. Yes, ma'am.
That process that you described, from the time that FEMA gets the request until the SYNC makes a decision on who goes where, how long does that usually take, and have we been increasing that over the past time, or have we made it faster over the last 2 days?
I'll tell you, because it's so sensitive, those requests, and that's why that chain is so short, you know, between us and the Secretary of Defense that has the Secretary of the Army in it. The length of time, we turn them around inside of hours if that's what's required. Because DOMS has been in this business for a long time, and people know, you know, when you call and it's DOMS, you end up doing a lot of stuff vocal. VOCO, V-O-C-O, you know, voice, right? And the next thing is with orders to follow. Now, what we do is we have an assistant to the Secretary of the Army that works that lane consistently. Mrs. Condon does that piece. She will get the VOCO. That means that we know that that order is going to be signed. So depending upon the situation, you know, we know how fast it's got to move through the system. And those things that require getting there in a hurry, we're going to light that fire, and it's going to move through.
Can you tell us how quickly the military started responding after that first plane hit?
I will tell you that there's different. When you say the military, again, I'm here to talk to you about consequence management, which is in support of a lead federal agency. And I know this is complex. You know, there's MACDIS, there's MACA, which is the overarching thing. There's crisis management in support of FBI, which I can't talk to you about. You know, we're talking about the general support.
Those things that you described.
Those things that I described, the Air National Guard was moving stuff, and I'd have to go back and look whether some of those were Air Force and Air Reserve. I don't know if I have all the details on exactly who moved it, and we can provide that for you. But they were moving stuff within an hour. Within hours, there was stuff moving. That's
General,
how.
you said that the command center, the Army Operations Center, was essentially able to continue operations. Did it continue operations, or did it stop during the time when the building was? Did they evacuate along with everybody else?
No, never evacuated. In fact, when I called in, can I tell you, when I came down the road and that plane hit the building, I took a cell phone and called our ops center, and they said, you know, what I got is we're running full bore. The whole staff's here. Get here quick.
Your officer isn't DOMS located in the area that was affected and is?
No, sir. We're co-located in the bunker with what essentially is current operations.
So even though that part of the building is closed off to us, there's still people operating in that area?
We operated all the way through. Now we had, you know, we were tracking where the fire was and where the fumes were. I can't speak to the other operations centers except we had connectivity with them, just like the Navy. We were constantly connected. We're electronically linked with everyone, but we never shut down.
You described earlier
not even any limited operations.
You described earlier a giant water tank with a little faucet. Elaborate on that. Are you basically suggesting that there are equipment and personnel that would like to get into New York City right now to help them, but just because of the logistical and physical constraints can't do that?
What I would say to you is that probably at the point of attack, as dangerous as that is, and I don't know, I haven't been in there, they may have all the people that you can saturate that with at the time. They definitely have the equipment. If you saw the lifting, and what you're talking about right now is lifting devices, cranes. You know, and the construction equipment that's in New York City, probably except for the Navy out on the yards, we don't have anything that would approach that kind of capability. We have expertise. We have logistical type support capabilities, and what I'm telling you is that we've got to be careful about packing everything in there and getting out of the way until the incident command systems get all that immediate response. That's what they're still in, immediate response up there. Until they get that straightened out, and we've got people on the outside talking to us, we can't start funneling into there, because right now those lines of communications are pretty well blocked. All the emergency vehicles that have to move back and forth on that thing, we don't want to impact with any of that. We'll be told when we don't impact with that.
So I have to say, I'm a little confused. How much sort of military personnel and equipment and hardware is in Lower Manhattan right now helping?
I can't answer that. I don't have. I can tell you military personnel that are actually on the ground right now in New York probably consist mostly of the New York National Guard, and they're in an area security mission. Now there are some other people. Let me give you some examples. All the services have been tasked for these chaplain teams that are in there. Quite a deal. I mean,
there are military chaplains there.
Military chaplains. All of them are in there right now, taking care of those kinds of things and protecting the dignity of the situation.
Can you give us a few more specific examples like those New York National Guard military chaplains, or what is actually on the ground assisting right
now?
In
New York City, the Corps of Engineers will be the next one that I would tell you about. Under the 13, I believe, emergency support functions that FEMA has. It's organized where you have different lead federal agencies that are responsible for each one. DOD is in support of nearly every one of them as a key player. But there's one, which is civil engineering, that's headed by the Corps of Engineers. So the Corps is in there, you know, in terms, you know, of electrical, in terms of water, all those kinds of pieces, they're in there. Now there's, you know, there is a huge piece that's waiting back here in terms of the planning, command and control mechanism with an organization down at Joint Forces Command, and that's what they call JTFCS. That together with a couple of other headquarters that are planning for, if there is a response required from the military, how will you command and control that response, and to and under what incident commander? Okay, now that response, there are several options out there with that. You know, is that response, and I don't want to get into figures, you know, is it tens of thousands, or is it 5,000? Or it depends. You know, it depends on what we're asked to do.
Last question: is it fair to say that the military will have a greater role in the days going forward as you move beyond sort of the first responder, which I guess sounds like they're still in now, and into, I don't know what the phase after that is, but is that where we're going to see more?
I would really be surprised if that were not true. What we have to be careful of is getting in front of the local, state, all the first, and again, they have an army in New York City of first responders. I wish I had the total number, and I don't. But they have an army in New York City already committed to this from all walks of life. Yes, ma'am.
Sir, were any of the weapons of mass destruction civil support teams activated?
Activated is probably not the right term for this, because activation to me would imply maybe a Federal 10 or Federal Title 10 status. The team, I believe, from New York City, or from New York, number 2, is that correct? Number 2, and this is another one that was sent in there. That team was deployed.
Has that team been certified?
That team has been certified. Yes, that's a good question, by the way. Now, I'll tell you that in the early hours, there was another team that was in training in New Mexico that we brought back rapidly into another state. I don't even want to go into the state where it flew back into, but not knowing what was next, it was brought back to the state in the early hours of the crisis.
Was that second team also one of the ones that has been certified?
Yes, ma'am. In fact, all 10 have been certified. All 9 of the 10, the last one is still out there. And again, without going into that particular state, it wasn't close to New York City, the particular team that hasn't been certified, but it was a certified team. And I'll tell you that there's another piece, you know, in this Pentagon, you know, because it's almost inconceivable with a fireball that you would have some kind of agent that could survive that heat and that fire. But there was another team that was brought in here, not a CST team, okay, but another special mission unit that came in by design to see, you know, what could you possibly have in terms of chem or bio.
The Marine team in Quantico?
Sir, what we'd end up doing is I would rather have somebody get back to you with the information on that.
Can I draw out one issue? This was identified early on as a terrorist attack. The Army in particular has resident counterterrorism capabilities at JSOC, as you know. Was Delta activated or put on alert after the attacks?
I cannot answer that. I will tell you that the services, the DOD, alerted everyone that would have a potential mission.
Were any specialized counterterrorism teams activated?
I cannot. That is not even my lane. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's again consequence. The FBI piece of this, which is crisis management. We're going to hold that close until someone wants to release that.
That's how that kind of a capability would.
That's exactly right. But you understand the significance. A great question, But now you're into plans that we cannot divulge who works for who and the time frame and who. But as I said earlier, everybody and all special mission units were alerted.
Secretary of Transportation Mineta today asked for Delta Force training from marshals. Has that request formally come down through the DOMS process?
We have not seen. Now, I've been up here, and I'm getting a head shake over here that the answer is no. And I will tell you that, okay, the answer, we have not seen the request at DOMS, and we deal with consequence management. And the problem is, this may go, not the problem, the issue is it'll go to someone else to take care of that. Okay. Fair enough?
Thank you, sir. Thanks, folks.
Okay.